Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. For today's teamwork build, we're building a Necromancer. So if you want a Google Sheet for this and a bunch of other builds, you can check out the link in the description below for my Patreon page. But before we get into the build, I do want to talk about something important from my last video. So on my last video, I got this comment from Derpal Cornucopia. He basically says that the Reanimator archetype seems like an archetype that would piss people off. Well, I do think that that is true in some situations. It's not true all the time. But an archetype like the Reanimator is a perfect example of one of the reasons why a Session 0 is vital in Pathfinder 2e, at least in my opinion. A Session 0 is a great time to talk about this kind of thing. It's also a great time to talk about feats and abilities and how they can work together. But as for this build, I will say this. This build most definitely has to be evil. However, just because a character is evil does not mean that they can't work as a team. I proved that much with my Fear Tyrant champion build that I covered last Halloween. And this build most certainly does not have to be a grave robber. Adventurers tend to leave bodies wherever they go, even if they're good. Why not use those corpses to help the team? Anyway, this video is going to be a little longer than my previous videos because we're talking about a spellcaster here. This build is 100% going to use 2 spell lists. So I'm going to try to limit the spells I cover in this video to 1 per list per spell level. Anyway, now that all of that's out of the way, let's get into the builds. For our ancestry, we're going half elf. This build is a little mad, so we don't want to go full elf and take that minus the constitution. Plus we need a few human feats for this build anyway, so we might as well go half elf. Then for our background, we're going with Necromancer's Apprentice. Quick identification will allow us to quickly identify magical items and whether we or another party member can use them. So if we see a wand on a table during combat, we can figure out what type of wand it is and whether we can use it in that combat or if it's better to wait until after the combat to pick it up. For class, we're building a wizard today. And of course, our school is going to be necromancy, of course. Why wouldn't it be? This will give us an extra necromancy spell for our spellbook and the Call of the Grave focus spell. Call of the Grave will let us sicken a creature, and if we critically hit, they are also slowed 1. Call of the Grave combines 2 of the best conditions you could ever put on an enemy into 1 spell. Granted, you gotta crit succeed to get the slowed, but even sickened to 1 is a -1 to everything, and they have to spend an action to get rid of it. The fact that this is a level 1 focus spell is amazing. For our arcane thesis, we're going with spell substitution. Necromancy spells aren't always going to work. So if we're running into a lot of enemies that our necromancy spells aren't really working against, then if somebody needs to refocus, we can swap out a spell for something else. Our starting ability scores for this build are going to be Strength 10, Dexterity 12, Constitution 10, Intelligence 18, Wisdom 14, and Charisma 14. For first level, we get our spells and we get an Ancestry feat. For our Ancestry feat, we're going Nimble Elf. This will increase our speed to 30 feet, which will help us stay away from those strength-based enemies. For spells, there's really only one necromancy cantrip that helps us with this build, and that is Chill Touch. This will help us do some damage to living creatures, and if they critic fail, they're enfeebled 1. It will also allow us to make enemy undead flat-footed if we need to. For first level, Animate Dead is obviously a must-take for this build. However, not going to go into too much detail on that, since all it does is let you summon an undead for up to a minute. But Rave Enfeeblement is another great spell that you can take at this level. This spell will really help the party with those strength-based enemies, making them enfeebled and lowering their accuracy and damage. For second level, we get 2 class feats. Our first is going to be Reach Spell. Our physical stats are not good, so we don't want to be anywhere near melee combat. And a ton of necromancy spells are touch spells, especially the ones we want for this build. So let's give all those spells a range of 30 feet instead of touch. Then we'll take our first dedication, the Cleric dedication. And for our deity, you can pretty much pick any deity as long as two things are true. The deity in question has the death domain, and its anathema does not include creating undead. The dedication will allow us to prepare 2 cantrips per day from the divine list. So for cantrips, I recommend you prepare support spells like Forbidding Ward, since we've already got Chill Touch from our wizard spells. At third, we get a general feat, so we're just going to go with Fleet for more speed. Again, we want to be as far away from melee enemies as we can be, and this is going to give us a speed of 35, which is really going to help with that. And then of course, we get second level wizard spells. For this, I recommend you take Bone Shaker. So if you don't know, we can target one creature within 100 feet that has a skeleton. We deal 3d8 bludgeoning damage per 2 spell levels, but that's not what's important here. If we spend 3 actions on the spell, then we can move the target a certain distance depending on how they did on their save. So we can move them between 2 allies so they have flanking. We can move them further back so they have to spend an action moving up. There's a lot of things we can do with this. But on anything but a critical success or a critical failure, they can fall prone to avoid moving. Of course, all that does is make them flat-footed. And if they want to do anything really, they kind of have to get back up, which of course is going to provoke an attack of opportunity from anyone who has it. Also, if the target at least fails their saving throw, they're also enfeebled. At level 4 is 2 more class feats. First up is Linked Focus. Once per day, when we drain our bonded item to cast a necromancy spell, we also get back 1 focus point. So yeah, essentially we get 1 more use of our focus spells a day, before we have to refocus. Then we'll pick up basic cleric spellcasting. Of course, we're going to need harm to heal our undead minions, and to, well, harm our enemies if we want to. But another good spell to take here is Bane. When we're not summoning undead and using them to attack our enemies, we're going to want to be debuffing our foes. And while Bane isn't a necromancy spell, it is a good debuff that can affect multiple enemies. Giving all enemies in an area -1 on attack rolls is really good, especially for a first level spell. At 5th level, we get quite a few things. First, we get our ability score increases. We want to increase our dexterity and then all of our mental stats. That's intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. We also get an ancestry feat, which we're going to go with Clever Improviser. This will increase all of our untrained skills by half our level, and then later, our full level. As a wizard, even with our high intelligence, we're still not going to have that many trained skills. So rather than having to spend our skill increases on getting new skills, we'll just become close to being trained in those skills. And finally, we get 3rd level wizard spells. And the spell I recommend here is Rouse Skeletons. I always love this spell because it's difficult terrain that you can move and does damage. However, it is only a 10-foot burst area and you do have to sustain it. I personally really like this spell, but you could go with something like Blindness or even Vampiric Touch here as well. At 6th, 2 class feats and 2nd level cleric spells. First up is Domain Initiate, and we want the Death Domain here. This will give us the Death's Call focus spell. As a reaction, when a living creature dies within 20 feet of you, or an undead is destroyed within 20 feet of you, you gain temporary hit points for 1 minute. These temporary hit points equal the creature's level plus our wisdom modifier. And if the creature's undead, we double that. This is going to combo extremely well with a feat we're going to take much later on. But for now, we can use this whenever one of our undead minions goes down. Even one of our summoned ones. Then we'll take our Reanimator dedication. This will help us with our Animate Dead spells, since we can swap out any of our spells prepared for an Animate Dead of the same level. We just have to spend 10 minutes on it. Also, all of our undead summons also get a +1 to everything, which is really amazing. And then for the 2nd level cleric spell, I recommend, if you have access to it, to take Imp Sting. This will do a little bit of poison damage each round, but it'll also make them clumsy and possibly slowed. Another great debuff spell from the Necromancy school. At 7th, we get a general feat and 4th level wizard spells. For our general feat, we're going to take Incredible Initiative. This will help us get at least one undead minion out there right away. Then we can focus on sustaining that undead and casting some of our other spells. At this level, I recommend you take Seal Fate. On anything but a critical success, we give the opponent weakness 2 to basically any type of damage we want for at least one round. This one is especially good if you've got a party member that specializes in a particular type of damage. And it doesn't even have to be a spellcaster. And the best part is, if they critically fail on the saving throw, that's permanent. Okay, time for the first teamwork report of this video. Unfortunately, we really haven't gotten to the cool stuff yet. So the strategy at this point is fairly simple. First thing we want to do is summon our undead. Then we sustain the undead, have them attack, and then cast debuff spells. If one of our undead goes down, use Death's Call. Use Reach Spell on the many touch necromancy spells that we want to use. You could also use the Spectral Hand spell here, but I would only do that if you need to move or something. For items, at this level there really isn't any items that will really help what this build is trying to do. Okay, at 8th, we get 2 more class feats and 3rd level cleric spells. We'll start with Command Undead. This is our, oh hey enemy undead, how about you come work for me? Unfortunately, eventually we are going to have to destroy the undead that we take control of with this feat. However, we can be pretty reckless with this undead, since if it's destroyed before the duration ends, then we don't have to worry about it. Then on the free archetype side, at this level, we'll take Macabre Virtuoso. This will give us 2 different versions of the Create Undead ritual for 2 different types of common undead. We can cast these rituals by ourselves without a secondary caster. This will give us some permanent undead minions that we can just have without even casting the Animate Dead spell. That is very handy and will go extremely well with a feat we'll take later on. Then for our cleric spell for this level, we've got Agonizing Despair. This will allow us to do mental damage and frighten our targets. This is mainly so that we can save our Call of the Grave for those really tough enemies. At 9th, of course, we get an Ancestry feat and our 5th level wizard spells. For our Ancestry feat, we're going with Elf Step. That'll allow us to step twice for an action, allowing us to get out of those sticky situations with melee fighters that much easier. For a spell for this level, I recommend Mariner's Curse. With this spell, on anything but a critical success, the target is at least sickened 1. In addition, if they at least fail their saving throw and happen to be on the sea, at least a mile from shore, they are also slowed 1. This is just a better version of Call of the Grave, especially if you happen to be on the sea. As I'm going through this, I am really surprised how many really good debuff spells Necromancy has. It's actually kind of ridiculous. At 10th, we actually don't get any spells, but we do get a few things. We get our ability score increases, and we get 2 class feats. For our ability score increases, we want to increase the same 4 we did last time. So that's Dexterity and all 3 of our mental ability scores. Then for our class feats, we're going to start with Quicken Casting. Come on, of course we're taking this. Our main spell that we want to use is a 3-action spell. So why not be able to cast that once a day as a 2-action spell? And then move or something else. I mean, we can only use this on our arcane spells, but we have more arcane spells than divine spells anyway. Then on the free archetype side, we'll take Bonds of Death. This will allow us to keep 2 undead summons up at the same time once a day. And all it takes is 1 action to do so. For level 11, we're going to go ahead and pick up Die Hard for our general feat. This will make us die at dying 5 instead of dying 4. And then of course we do get 6th level wizard spells. My recommendation for this level is Purple Worm Sting. This will do some very good damage, especially if we get that poison. However, what's most important here is that enfeebled condition. Great to use against those strength-based enemies. At 12th, we get 2 more class feats, so first we're going to go with Selective Energy. This feat is the main reason why we need our charisma to be high. So now we can cast a 3-action version of Harm, heal all our undead minions, hurt our enemies, and not hurt our friends. So yay for that! Then we'll take Expert Cleric Spellcasting, which will give us 4th level Cleric spells. And the spell I recommend you take is Pernicious Poltergeist. We can create a 10-foot burst within 60 feet that we can sustain for up to 1 minute. Every round the spell creates one of the following effects in that area. 4d10 negative damage with a basic fortitude save, 4d8 force damage with a basic reflex save, or make the targets frightened too with a will save. Yes, with this spell, we can target whichever one of their saves is the lowest. You could also prepare Internal Insurrection in this slot if you have access to it. At level 13, we get another Ancestry feat and 7th level Wizard spells. So for our Ancestry feat, we're going to go with Pinch Time. This is just haste on ourselves once a day. Between casting and sustaining spells, this build has a lot to do. We're obviously not going to use the hasted action to strike, but we most certainly can use it to step or stride. That will come in very handy when we need to sustain our summon, cast a spell, and still need to move all in one round. My recommended necromancy spell here is Lang Sting. This will let us do poison damage and inflict the drained condition, which of course lowers their HP even more. However, what most people don't realize is that the drain condition also affects their fortitude saving throws, which is the highest save for a lot of creatures. At 14th is when this build really takes off. We will start with Sepulchral Sublimation. This is the single best necromancy feat that we have right now, so of course we're taking this. This will allow us to use undead that we've created using the Create Undead ritual to cast spells. We destroy one undead that is permanently under our control to cast a necromancy spell that is at least half the level of the undead we destroyed without expending a spell slot. Then on our free archetype side, we'll take Divine Breath. We can also cast 5th level divine spells here, which means we get an extra slot for everything up to 3rd level spells. Recommended spell for this level is Wall of Flesh. When we cast the spell, we can choose to give the wall arms, eyes, or mouths. If we give it arms, the wall can grab people within 5 feet of it. If we give it eyes, then we can see through those eyes. And if we give it mouths, the wall can bite people, and we can heal it by giving it potions. This spell will allow us to protect ourselves and possibly debuff the opponent if we want to. Time for Teamwork Report number 2. At this point, this build does have some setup involved. When we've got the downtime, we want to use our Create Undead ritual to create some permanent undead. But remember, we can only have 4 minions at one time, which thanks to our feat, we can do in 1 day. So as long as we have 1 day of downtime, we can create as many undead as we can control. That being said, most of these undead are going to be sacrificed for free spell slots. But once we start losing those, then we can start casting Animate Dead. Remember that our main focus here is to summon undead, use them to help our allies, and also debuff our enemies even further. And remember that Death's Call works when any undead is destroyed within 20 feet of us. That includes any that we destroy using Sepulchral Sublimation. So that's free spell slots and temporary hit points, as long as we have a focus spell to use. Pretty good, right? Also, there are a couple of consumable items that will help this build. The first is Incense of Distilled Death. Undead in a 10-foot emanation from the incense gain fast healing 4. This does not negatively impact living creatures. This lasts for 1 minute and cannot be stopped. We'll also want some Dust of Corpse animation as well as a greater version later. This will basically allow us to cast Animate Dead without expending a spell slot. At 15th, we get ability score increases, a general feat, and 8th level wizard spell slots. Our ability score increases are going to be the same as they have been this whole time. Dex, Intelligence, Wisdom, Charisma. As for our general feat, we're going to go with Toughness. Hit points equal to our level, and the DC of our recovery checks is reduced by 1. As for the recommended spell, there really isn't a Necromancy spell at level 8 that's really going to help us with this build other than a rare one. So instead I'm going to recommend Disappearance. This will basically allow us to be invisible for 10 minutes and still do all of our stuff, since it doesn't end when we use a hostile action. Plus the rogue in your party will really love this spell. Then at 16th, 2 class feats and 6th level cleric spells. Our first feat at this level is going to be Effortless Concentration. This feat combined with Bonds of Death will allow us to maintain up to 3 summons at the same time and still have the actions to cast our debuff spells. Granted, Bonds of Death is only a once per day thing, but against those boss fights, having 3 undead to protect us and have the actions to cast spells is really good. As for the recommended spell, again, not too many necromancy spells that are really going to help us here. So instead I'm going to recommend Righteous Might. This will allow us to be in melee if we need to. Granted, we're probably not going to need to be in melee very much, but there's always that chance. Oh, almost forgot. At level 16 on the free archetype side of things, we want to take Surging Focus. This will allow us to regain a focus point whenever one of our allies is reduced to 0 hit points. Like say, one of our allies or one of our undead minions. This is only a once per day thing, but it's kind of our ace in the hole for if we happen to run out of focus points. Okay, level 17 gives us our last ancestry feat and 9th level wizard spells finally. Our ancestry feat is going to be Incredible Improvisation. This will essentially allow us to become an expert in a skill that we're untrained in once per day. So if we really need to jump that gap, expert in athletics. Need to squeeze through that area, expert in acrobatics. The list goes on. Recommended spell for this level is going to be Lenormand Sting. Do a bunch of damage and inflict the drain condition, which, like I said before, lowers their HP and their fortitude saves. Our first feat for level 18 is going to be Superior Bond. This will allow us to use Drain Bonded item twice per day, but the second time we can only use it to cast a spell that is 2 levels lower than our highest spell slots, which currently is level 9. So the second time we can only cast up to a 7th level spell. But this will give us a little more debuff potential. Then on the free archetype side, we'll take Master Cleric Spellcasting, which at this point will give us a 7th level spell slot. And the spell I recommend that you fill that with is Tempest of Shades. This is an incarnate spell that on arrival will make the opponents drained. And when it leaves, it makes them frightened. These two won't stack with each other, but they're both great debuffs. At level 19, we get our last general feat, plus 10th level wizard spells. For our general feat, we're going to go with Canny Acumen for our fortitude saving throws. Our fortitude save isn't very good, so this will keep us on par with our reflex saves, which are better because our dex is higher. As for our 10th level spell slot, we can pretty much prepare anything we want in this slot. Therefore, the best thing we can do is either or one of our debuff spells. And lastly, at level 20, we get quite a few things. First, ability score increases, then 2 class feats, and then 8th level cleric spells. So for our ability score increases, upping our dex really won't help us. So instead, we'll want to up our Constitution, Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma. For our first feat, we'll take Spell Mastery. This will give us 4 different leveled spells that are always prepared and have their own spell slots. They can be up to 9th level, so we definitely want 9th level Animate Dead as one of them. For the rest, I think you just pick necromancy debuff spells that you like. On the free archetype side, we'll take Improved Command Undead. This will allow us to control an undead for 1 round, even if they succeed on their saving throw, but not if they critically succeed. If they fail, they're our minion for 10 minutes. If they critically fail, they're our minion for 24 hours. As for our 8th level cleric spell, I recommend Spiritual Epidemic. With this spell, we can make the target enfeebled and stupefied. In addition, anytime someone tries to cast a divine or occult spell on the target, they also must make a will save or be affected by this curse. I'm not going to do a third teamwork report for this build since not much has really changed. The only things that have really changed at this point are higher level spells, so we can debuff our enemies more and do more damage, and we can maintain more animate dead spells at the same time, and still cast spells. And I've pretty much covered the items that are going to help this build. Sadly, most of the magic items that are centered around necromancy are focused on destroying undead, not bolstering them. And that's going to do it for this build. So, if you want to see what else the Reanimator archetype can do, you can check out this video here. Remember, teamwork is vital, and I'll see you guys next time.